Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to As I Live and Grieve. And that's exactly what we're doing every day, isn't it? We're living and we're grieving. Somehow, and I don't quite know how it happens, probably because I'm not a neuroscientist or a neurobiologist, but somehow my grief has taken me from devastating to a redefinition, if you will, of my life. And I think it tends to do that as time goes on, and it kind of morphs organically without us even realizing it until one day we look back. So today, let's stay in the present and help me greet our new guest. How are you, AJ Coleman?
Great to be here. How is everybody?
I think everybody's doing fine. If I look out the window, I do see white, but I also see some sunshine. And all I can think of is, well, it's February, which is closer to March, which is closer to April and spring. And that's the positive note that will forge forward. Before I start asking my questions, which I never seem to run out of, would you identify yourself and help our guests get a little more acquainted? Who is AJ Coleman?
Great. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name is AJ Coleman. I am the author of Keep Those Feet Moving. I wrote a book about my grief loss journey, and my grief loss is not only just is about loss of a loved one, as I lost my wife 15 years ago to cancer, but it's also about grief loss from relationships, jobs, faith, and growing and mentoring my daughter as a single dad. And I put everything in together into a wonderful book to help others to learn to cope with their own grief and learn to overcome and eventually live a more fruitful life.
Well, the title of your book, Keep Those Feet Moving, fascinates me. I think that's a great title. And for me, titles are everything. Whether it's a book, a podcast, we labored long and hard before we stumbled across As I Live and Grieve. And I've had so many people comment on it that I did eventually trademark it. It is now a registered trademark. But Keep Those Feet Moving says it all. And that's exactly what we need to do in grief. It could be a baby step, for sure, but we have to keep looking forward. I know I saw a quote that suggests to not look in the rearview mirror because you're not going that way.
Yes.
Having said that, memories can help a lot too, and memories will help us heal. So I guess my first question for you, I can speak to the experience of being a single mom, but I can't speak to that experience of being a single dad, especially raising a daughter. I raised 2 daughters as a single mom, but I can't imagine what it must be like to be a dad and go through that. Can you talk about that a little more?
Well, my wife was diagnosed with cancer when our daughter was 2 months old. And I learned to become not only my wife's primary caretaker, but also my daughter's caretaker. And I've learned to balance different roles. And when my wife passed away, that's when all the parental duties fell on me. And it's interesting, right? You don't come home from a hospital with a manual set of instructions on parenthood. And
No.
it looks as if you sort of just wing it as you go.
Yes.
One of the things that I had learned as a single dad, also grieving the loss of a spouse, is the importance of time schedules and ensuring that my daughter took her naps at the same scheduled time twice a day, followed the same pattern. And not only was it helpful for me, but it was helpful for her because she would be on a certain schedule.
Right.
And I know a lot of time we get excited as parents to rush quickly to take our children out for maybe a lunch or an event too close to their naps.
Yeah.
And sometimes it always doesn't go as planned, right?
It can be very chaotic.
It is. And little things that I've learned as a single dad takes me into where we are today. And she is now 17 years old, and we are very close. Sometimes she tells me a little too much of things I really don't want to hear. But I welcome that.
Yeah.
But
that just speaks to the bond that you have with her.
It is truly amazing. But through the years, it was tough for her to navigate on her own, because here a lot of her play school friends had moms, and they would go and get their nails done. They would get their hairs done. They would do all the wonderful special things that mom and daughters do together. Sure. And then here comes dad. Mm-hmm. What does dad know about painting nails, right? What does dad know about petty gossip around the park?
Right.
But it made us strong together. And I would tell you, without her, I would not have gotten as far in my grief journey early on without her, because I relied so much on her to carry me through, as much as she relied on me providing her needs.
Sure.
But it definitely had, we had some tough times in terms of trying to explain certain conversations that dad don't do a good job with. But, playing the disciplinarian on both sides, being the law. Mm-hmm. But I have grown to have nothing but admiration for all the moms that are out there, whether they are single, whether they are in a relationship, raising their child, like the nurturing, the amount of strength that they carry daily, in addition to the 90,000 other jobs that they do. I don't think people get enough appreciation for just how important having that nurturing is with them.
Yeah, see, and I feel the same way for dads, because dads are in a different position, again, whether they're single, in a relationship, or whatever. But for dads, they handle emotions differently for the most part. So they might hear something that they don't really care to hear. But they still need somehow to compose themselves. Both men and women do. Both mom and dads do. You just need to respond and react accordingly. And it's not easy. And I think it's as much about the generational difference as it is about anything else. Do you remember about how old your daughter was when she tended to notice that she didn't have her mom?
It was early. She was wise beyond her years, and I've always been very transparent with her.
Yeah.
I used different terminology to help her understand certain concepts. For instance, instead of telling her that her mom was sick, I told her that her mom had an illness. So when she hears the word sick, where kids get sick, they go to the doctor's office for a sniffle or a sneeze or something like that, it's not going to resonate her like, oh my gosh, am I going to have something my mommy had? Yeah. So I would be very transparent, and she recognized. I mean, we did build her a nice support. She is very close with her maternal grandparents. That relationship was important to her.
Sure.
To help grow, and I've always believed keeping her mother's memory with us was important. And even though sometimes it's difficult to talk about, but it helps her grow. It helps her know that she's loved. And there were times when she was much younger, when we would go and fight the bedtime routine, where she wanted to stay up a little later, and she would say, well, mommy would want me to stay up. And I'd be like, well, I think mommy would want you to go to bed earlier. 11 o'clock at night, So it had advantages and disadvantages, but she understood. But the hard part for her is that she really doesn't have a live memory of her mother.
Okay.
She has videos, she has stories, she has photos, but she doesn't really remember what life was like. And that's sort of how it was for me. I didn't know how to raise a child in a partnership with two people, right? And we equate it to basketball, playing zone defense here, right? I'm playing, one-on-one here all the time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that I think unknowingly at the time was more advantage for us, because we have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
It used to be. And I think that also helps with grief as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a very valid point. I also want to say, kudos to you for helping keep that relationship with maternal grandparents, because often grandparents, when they lose a grandchild, they just eventually find themselves shoved to the side or when, they lose a child, but to allow them also to remain connected to her was, I'm sure, being a grandparent myself, vital for their own grieving process, that they probably see their daughter in her a lot.
It definitely is important. And I recognized early on, everybody grieves differently. And I can't imagine losing a child. I can't imagine what it's like to have sudden loss. And the importance of any grief is closure. How do you learn to accept what has happened and not necessarily forget, but just move on and keep that memory a part of it?
Yeah.
And for them, my daughter definitely resembles a lot of my wife, mentally, physically, the expressions. And I think from eyes down, she resembles exactly like her mother. And we will go places and we may not have seen family for a long time and people will do a double take.
Yeah.
From the eyes and up, she resembles me. So she got the best of both worlds, I think.
Sure.
But from a grandparent perspective, I understand. I had to rely on them also for help or, helping watch when I need to take care of something, go to the doctor's appointment, or if work was running late. And it wasn't easy because when you deal with grief, there are so many different stages, so many different scenarios.
Yeah, yeah. And it's as you watched your daughter grow in that environment without her mom there, do you think her grieving was any different than what we might say was I hate to use the word normal, but I'm going to say a normal or common routine? Did she kind of skip through some areas? Because I can only imagine how hard it would be to grieve someone that you never met.
It was challenging in a sense of her just trying to fill in the pieces. And no matter how much we try to protect our children, there's always something that slips through the cracks. And there was an incident when she was in preschool where I got a call one afternoon to come pick her up. And it was maybe about a week before Mother's Day.
Okay.
Kids were, I guess, making
sure, that makes
projects.
School. Yeah.
And the preschool was well aware of that situation in her, I guess, write-up or biography. She's very sensitive about the mother not having one, just use different terms around her. Well, apparently they were saying, let's make Mother's Day cards for our mothers. And she sat there. And from what I was told, the teacher went up to her and said, well, why aren't you making something for your mom?
Yeah.
Well, that's when my daughter snapped. And she's like, my mom is dead. Now what do you want me to do?
Oh.
And so I'm getting the call thinking, okay, well, maybe she is exhibiting a little remorse. She's, sad. No, I get the call because she exhibited hostile behavior by snapping at the teacher.
See, and that's not fair. That was her form of grief.
Yeah, so I come in and I explained to the administrative staff, I said, you have to look at the file and just understand that, it's okay to go to her and say mothers, grandmothers, aunts. She would have picked up on that and not necessarily. Sure. But when you just call it to one attention, it was a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
She doesn't really speak about it as much because, again, the physical, the live memory was never really there other than the videos.
Right.
But we do our very best to honor the anniversaries. We do our best to keep her in memory. And then to me, that's important. Now, again, very similar to how you opened it. We are not doctors. We are not the experts, but we are experts in our own grievances and experiences. I just found the best way to handle it with her was always be transparent, keep the memory alive, celebrate her life, not mourn the loss, and let her develop into the young woman that she is and determine, okay, you know what? I need a little bit more help here. I need a little bit more help there. And if I do my job right, I've enabled her to kind of advocate to me and to others what nurturing she wants, or maybe she does want to talk. I will tell you, she has not read my book yet.
Okay. I
had written a book to really get a lot of things out in the open for her so she can understand who Dad is. And she doesn't want, and she does not want to read it. And I understand why.
Yeah.
But then, she can't come back and say that I'm not making good dad jokes. But it's one of those things where that's also a form of grief. I'm not going to force it on her. I know her friends have seen different podcasts that I've done. They've seen the book, and she's just not ready for it. But
yeah,
overall, for her, it's part of that, is recognizing where you have some great benefits and opportunities for you to fill in those gaps. And she's starting to come around to fill those out as she continues to mature.
Yeah, and I think as she continues to grow and mature, as you say, some of the puzzle pieces will fit together. They really will.
Yes. And then there were times I sometimes I just scratch my head. I'm like, this is definitely not my gene pool. When something goes down, I'm like, I think that might be the other gene pool. That's me. And we try to inject humor into a lot of things. Because life is not all that serious if you look back, right? You can make it very serious, but you have to learn to laugh and take the memories that we have.
Right.
And there are times where, she'll call me out for some of her earliest memories and what I've done that maybe, maybe wasn't the right moment, or things that I would say.
Yes.
But it's funny how kids are and how people take grief to different stages. Humor.
It is.
It's a grief element that I think people misunderstand.
Yeah, and I know I can't tell you how many times when I was being challenged by one of my daughters about either a punishment that I decided on or, no, you can't do this, no, that party you can't go to, that they said, well, that's not fair. And I would say to them, this is the very first time in my life that I have been mother to a daughter at this age who is asked this question. I can only do what I think is right. And if it turns out to be wrong, all I'll be able to do is apologize. That's all. But, with everything I know, with all the information I have, unless you can come up with more. And at one point, when my younger daughter did something that really, really was bad, and I'm not going to embarrass her by sharing it online, I even had her choose her own punishment. I said, what do you think your punishment should be? And the poor child grounded herself for 6 months. I probably would have gone for 2 weeks, but she grounded herself for 6 months.
Wow.
And I think part of that was she was trying to impress her mom
Yep.
and let me know how really serious she wanted this to be. So, of course, after 2 weeks, I lifted her punishment. But that was an interesting experience as well. What do you think your punishment should be? But I used it to illustrate to them, you don't know. When you've never had to make that decision before, you don't always know that you're making the right one. All you can do is try. So, but it sounds like your relationship with your daughter is really a great one. Could I ask you more now about the title of your book? What was your intention with that title? Keep Those Feet Moving.
That's a great question. It's one of my favorite topics to share. And a lot of times just life comes at us, all different speeds. And when you try to get creative, and I am not a creative person at all, maybe humor-wise I can probably get by, but the aspect of coming up with a title, I struggle for weeks and weeks at a time. And there was just one day I was picking up dry cleaning, and ordinarily I would take a right to go back home, which was our normal route. And in our neighborhood and our town, we have freight trains that come through. And it was, if I'd gone right with the freight train coming through, I would have been just stopped. So instead of going right and taking the regular route home, I ended up taking a left, which is the much longer route, but it bypasses the train tracks and goes underneath the divide. And I just muttered to myself, keep those feet moving. And then I'm like, really almost like, stop. In the middle. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's it. And then I started thinking about it. I don't even remember the drive home. I was so thinking about it. And I'm like, that's it. And once I got the title, Keep Those Feet Moving, it made sense because we're always moving. And I've always understood the principle that when there is action around you, things happen, whether it's good, whether it's challenging or anything else. But when you come to a stopping point and you don't know where to go, that's when your thoughts catch up to you. That's where life starts catching up to you. So no matter what challenges you have, as long as you keep moving, you're going to go places. Things are going to work out. Things are going to be challenging, but you're going to find different ways. And you can go around something, go over something, under something, through something. But as long as there's action behind your driving force, you can accomplish anything. And that was my title. And the way the cover is designed for the book, from far away, it just says keep moving. And then you have to look in the middle, it says those feet. So that was sort of the inspiration. It was like taking a left turn instead of a right turn, just to keep going. I didn't want to sit and wait 5 minutes for a freight train to pass. Right. I just wanted to get going. Now, it probably took me longer to go home than if I had just sat at the train because of the route.
Well, look how productive it was. You got your title.
Yeah. Who said you can't make a left turn and still be right?
Well, yeah. And, not only that, but by going the wrong way, you might inadvertently solve a problem you've been having. It could turn out to be the right way for a lot of reasons.
It is. And I never thought I would write a book to document my thoughts, my feelings, and about my life and grief. And as soon as it was published and released, I think the next couple of days, I was like in my own, like, what did I just do? I just announced all of my thoughts and my private moments to the entire world. And then I thought about, how can I help others? How can I give back to people who are grieving like I was?
Right.
And that's kind of where we are today, and it's exactly what you do too, Gap. The hard work that's put into it is helping so many listeners.
Right. And, there are people get help and they get something, and I'm sure they'll get it out of your book or out of the podcast or whatever. They get things at different levels. Some could be very, very detailed to a specific person, a specific incident. But at the very, very least, what I think people need to get from books, podcasts, movies, conversation is just the thought that they're not alone. There are others out there that not only are grieving, but are struggling with that grief, are struggling with that process, yet somehow continue to move forward and continue to look for something better in life. And like I say, sometimes, somehow, before you know it, there it is. You look back and you think, wow, and I do it all the time. I am not the same person I was 8 years ago. Tom's been gone almost 7 years now. I'm not the same person, but I like the person I am. And that's probably more surprising to me than anything else.
Yeah, that is so spot on, right? A lot of times we get asked, especially in mourning, would you ever go back and what would you do differently so you wouldn't have to go through this? And that's a tough question to answer for anybody, right?
It is.
But in my faith, in my belief, and my journey, if I were to go back and change something, then who I am today, I would not be. It's almost like people like movies like Back to the Future, right? And the second, where they go back to like an alternate 1985, right?
Yeah.
And because you made one small change or a significant change, you're not the same. And for us to go out there and help and inspire, motivate others along the grief journey, it's important for them to know that they have done everything that they can. And where they're at today is not by accident. It's there, and they found your podcast to help them. And everything I believe in puts us in a position to be stronger. And that's why when people ask me, what would I change? And I come back and I would say nothing.
Yeah. I mean, even if you say, and a lot of people would say, the thing I would change is to have him not die. Well, okay, you'd have an entirely different life. Would you be happy? Perhaps. But if you think of it that way also, the people whose lives you and I may have impacted by the podcast, by your book, by your day-to-day life, those people wouldn't have had our help.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you want to call it whatever form of spirituality you want to use, whatever faith-based names, titles, whatever you want to call it, everything that happened, I believe, wasn't necessarily predestined because the choices were still mine to make. But I believe I have made the right choices so that lives that I might impact have been impacted. And I guess I like to believe that. It makes me feel better about the things that I do. Yeah. Do you feel that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I love what you said. I mean, that's exactly, it's about how can you carry on your loved one's legacy? Yeah. How can you share and celebrate many wonderful events that you've had together? And I've always said, you can't look back. You only look forward.
Right.
And the future is unknown.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
You can spend a lifetime looking and planning and doing everything. But if you're going to spend your time looking backwards, you're not going to run forward. That's where the action stops and you become stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I tried in my grief, I wanted to pick one trait that my husband had that I really admired about him. And I wanted to try to acquire that trait myself. It was just my own personal thought. This is maybe a way I can kind of keep his legacy alive, if you will. We used to joke about my husband, Tom, because there wasn't anyone in the world that he couldn't befriend. Anyone. And anytime we would go places, it would happen vacationing with my brother and his wife or something. It happened in Scotland, in Ireland, any place I ever went with him, that there would almost be a side bet that he would find at least one person, and somehow strike up a conversation with this perfect stranger. And within 5 minutes, the two of them would be conversing like they were best friends who had just found themselves together again after 20 years.
That's a wonderful
It happened every single time. I was never one to approach a stranger and make a comment. Mm-hmm. Never. That was not me. So I tried really, really hard to do that. I've done it. Some of the outcomes have been hilarious.
Yep.
I think I've told a couple online where Tom also would be one. If he saw a first responder and we happened to be in a cafe having breakfast or something, chances are he would buy that person's meal just as a thank you for their service. He was U.S. Army until the day he died. He would have been in the Army if they would have kept him, but his medical conditions forced him out and he retired. But so one time I tried to do that, I'm going to buy the meal, the lunch for these two officers over here. I was vacationing in New Mexico. And before the lunchtime was over, 6 of their friends joined them. I wound up buying lunch for a table of 8. But it was such an interesting story. And I've tried to do that. And, I've met some of the nicest people that were perfect strangers. Now, I don't have the talent that my husband had, but every time I make that first comment, whether it's, I like your shoes, or that color looks good on you, or thank you for your service, anything like that, it always generates a smile. It always generates a look of gratitude that someone feels they've been noticed, they've been recognized. So try it sometime. It's quite fun. It really is, that you've made someone happy that quickly.
That's important, right? And that's a wonderful legacy to not only take on, but to share. And now that you've challenged me, and I'm trying to think about how open am I? Do I go out there and do I do some of that stuff because I'm more reserved and I keep it to myself as well? But yeah, no, that's a great challenge. And
there are some days that I have to work at it.
Yeah,
there really are. It doesn't come natural to me like it did to my husband, but I do it. I try it, and of course, every time I do it, I think of him.
Yeah.
So it keeps him alive.
Exactly. That's why I call that celebrating the life, right? Because you're still with you. You're still doing things that remind you of him. Yeah. And that helps with the healing. That helps with the sleep. But it also brings closure, which is a really important part of grief that a lot of people don't talk about, because when they think closure, they think like, well, I'm just...
Well, they think it's over.
Yeah.
It's over. It ended. Well, it's not going to end.
But to me, closure is about acceptance. It happened. And where can I go to continue to celebrate? And I love that story that you just shared. And now I'm going to go out today and figure out what I can do.
Well, be careful if you buy somebody lunch, because they could have people joining them. In fact, I asked the officers at the table, I said, did you call all your friends or something? Because at first I wanted it to be kept a secret. I didn't want them to know who bought their lunch. That was the other part of it. But eventually the waitress caved and told them who it was, and they wanted to thank me.
I got a funny story about lunch. So back in kindergarten, when my daughter was enrolled into school, she had like a little meal plan lunch thing where, a card that she just swipes, right? And it's preloaded. And after like first day, 2, the card reloads. The second day, card reloads. Third day, card reloads. And at one point, I get a call from the school that says, Mr. Coleman, your daughter is buying lunch for everybody in the school. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, she's giving everybody and swiping the card. This is kindergarten. And I'm like, okay, we got to put a stop to this. So we come home. I sit her down. I'm like, walk me through this. She's like, Dad, I see you buying lunch and picking up things for people. I wanted to do that for all my new friends.
Oh, how sweet.
And I said, that's awesome, but we can't do this anymore because I can't keep spending all this money on buying everybody lunch. Because, Dad, but I'm like the most popular kid in school and I'm only in kindergarten. And I said, we can't keep buying everybody lunch. So
I love that.
So that's similar to her mother. Her mother was also very generous.
Yeah. Have you told her that's similar to what her mother would do?
Yes, yeah. And but your story reminded me of that as well. But but it resonates well, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of listeners looking for something to hold on to their loved ones.
Right.
And I like that.
Yeah, simple things. Well, sadly, the time has come that I have to wrap things up here. I want to give you a few minutes if there's anything you'd like to tell the listeners yourself without me directing it by questions. So the microphone and the floor are yours.
This was a great opportunity to sit with you and share with your listeners just some little insights about grief in general and how to navigate through what I call the puzzle, because depending on if you like puzzles or not, each puzzle piece fits differently. And sometimes we try to hammer in different puzzles, thinking it works and it doesn't, and then only frustration taking it out. But I would say this is grief is a part of what you're going through, but it's not who you are.
Right.
And a lot of times people think that, well, I'm always grieving. This is who I am. It's what you're doing.
Right.
Who you are is this magnificent person that can go out and change the world and take the grief and help others. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. And
that's right.
I'm humbled and honored to be with you and your listeners. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much taking the time and also just being candid and open and sharing with people. I honestly feel to the depths of my soul that when we are honest like that, even with our most sensitive feelings and emotions, that again, at the very least, it lets someone know that they are not alone. Someone will say or feel, yeah, I know how that feels, or yeah, that's how I feel. It does so much to validate for someone the experience they're going through. And then when they see people that kind of have, quote, come through it, unquote, it also maybe will give them hope that if they just hang on and keep those feet moving, so to speak, that they too will reach a point where they can look back on their life and say, wow, I'm somebody completely different, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. So listeners, thanks so much for tuning in again. We appreciate you so very much wherever you are around the world. And I watch my analytics, and I know you are all around the world. I will put my plea out there. If you know anyone going to the North or South Pole, I don't have downloads from those locations yet, and I'd love to get them. So, kidding, but not kidding. If you know somebody going to the North or South Pole, ask them to get on Wi-Fi and download an episode of As I Live and Grieve. And for listeners, please take care of yourselves and join us again next time as we all continue to live and grieve. Thanks, AJ.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.